happy that you have joined me once again. Today we are going to do a project that I think everyone can make personal, and that is do a portrait of an animal you love. And I have a reference, and I'm going to take you through the steps. It's a lot easier than you think it would be, and I'm excited to share some of my tips with you today because it's one of my favorite things to do. I do portraits actually on commission, and why I eyeball the transfer of the image. This is a way to get your proportions correct. So let's get ready to do a portrait. Okay, good. I am glad you're still with me. This particular exercise today, as per all the exercises, requires some doodle warm-up. So I've set up just some newsprint, taped it up with blue tape, and I'm gonna go through warming up my hand and warming up my creative muscles. So today, because we're going to be using different kinds of lines, curved lines, straight lines, probably a little bit of shadow, we're going to do a cartoon onto a canvas of the portrait of your pet of choice or animal of choice. And we're going to be doing contour lines and kind of mapping out sort of your own paint by numbers for our next class. So why don't we warm up with just some circles and some curved lines, and remember, be definitive, enjoy it, but this is just for practice. The product doesn't matter. It's about getting your hand, your head, and your heart all on the same page of being creative. So you can do some zigzag lines. You can practice some curved lines the other way, some parallel lines. We're going to be doing a pet, so why don't we practice just sort of this hatching, not necessarily cross hatching, for a fur edge, and then maybe a little zigzag. So I'm just getting my hand loose. It's nothing too crazy. I just want to stop being inhibited by this blank canvas. So I'm going to play with inexpensive newsprint and a permanent marker just to loosen up my creative muscles and my hand and just get ready. Doesn't matter what you draw. It's truly to get you comfortable with the page, with your hand, and all that good stuff. Now I think we're ready to begin our portrait. Okay, so let's remove our practice run, our doodle warm-up. I carefully wrapped the canvas that I'm going to talk about and what I did and what you're going to do at home. So this particular exercise is going to duplicate an image of an animal at twice its size. So what I'm using is a canvas that is 20 inches wide by 24 inches tall. I'm going to use blue tape, permanent marker, pencil, a yardstick, and if I need it, a tape measure, the pencil, and some, I'm using black pastel. You can use charcoal, you could use a pencil. I'm using a darker medium so that it really shows for you, but you can do it lighter so it doesn't kind of peek through the paint when we get to the paint stage in our next class. So to do the math, what you're going to do is take an image of an animal that you want to paint and double in size on a canvas. What I did with my cat, Wonkat, is I printed out a photo I took of him on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, just simple in color. And then I created a grid starting at the lower left corner. It's important to start in one corner and work your way out. So I gridded from the image edge, not necessarily the page edge, 1 inch increments all the way across, and I marked them. And then I marked them again from an upper part of the image. Then I took my ruler and I drew a pen line at every 1 inch increment. Then I marked in the other direction 1 inch from the base, 1 inch up. And I got to about 10 and change because the print edge wasn't exactly to edge. So the start of my 1 inch is a little above the edge of the paper. So my 1 inch increments with an 11 inch sheet of paper ended at just under 11. If you can see up here, you can tell that the size of this square is taller than the size of this square because it's a portion of the 11. Since I had a bleed edge on the bottom where it wasn't printed and a bit on the top. So that tells me that my image of my cat is really 10 segments high at 1 inch. So I'm going to just kind of fold that over so you see what I mean. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I numbered it on the left-hand side. Then what I did, just so I would be able to get my bearings like a crossword puzzle, is I lettered the columns. So I have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H. And if you look carefully, my H edge cut into some of the image. I'm not worried about the background image. I just want to be sure that the animal's image fits inside 8 inches by 10 inches when it's printed. So you can try this a couple of times till your animal is the size that you want it, proportionately to this space. And then we're gonna double the size of the animal by gridding up. And that's what I've done here. I actually wrote out directions because I didn't want to miss anything. This can get confusing, so you can rewind and play it back. But I've printed the image at 8.5 by 11. I've gridded the image to 1 inch by 1 inch squares to get me a total of 8 inches across and 10 inches high. However that fell on the image of the cat was fine. I can lose some of this image up here. So now I'm going to multiply those numbers by 2 to do a 200% increase in the image of the cat. And by doing that, instead of having it 8 inches across and 10 inches down, I've found where it is 8 segments across, or 16, and then going double on the 10 would be 20. And 20 inches, that is. So if you look, that's 8 inches. This is 16 inches, but the proportions are the same. So this is a 1 inch by 1 inch square. These are 2 inch by 2 inch squares. So then I just measured every 2 inches and it gives me 8 columns. And I multiplied the vertical by 2 inches and I get 10 columns. So just like this, proportionately, if I pull this forward, 8 across, 10 up, 8 across, 10 up. And then, because I wanted you to be able to see, I used blue tape to give myself that barrier. I could technically scale right onto the edge of the canvas, but this is a nice way to give yourself some breathing room. So print your animal as large as possible on the 8.5 by 11 inch piece of paper, because you're gonna automatically get this 2 inches all the way around gap that we'll deal with tomorrow or in the next lesson when we're painting this. So the grid is 2 inch by 2 inch squares, numbered 1 through 10 on the left, and A to H in the columns on the top. The important thing for doing that is to get your bearings, because when we go to transfer this image, that's everything. It's going to tell you which square you're in and tell you what you're looking at to draw. And you can put in as much information in this cartoon before we go to paint as you want, as you feel you need. That's what's so cool about this. Your proportions are going to be correct. And you're only drawing these little squares at a time. So you don't have to take in all this information and remember the proportions as you draw. You're just going to do it one square at a time. It's really great. I think you're going to like it. So I just wanted to get a little bit of a close-up so you can see. Again, here are your numbers. They correspond. Each square is 1 inch by 1 inch. Each larger square is 2 inches by 2 inches. And we're going to go through this one square at a time. So for me, I like to approach this kind of in rows and sort of check them off on the original image, then I know I've already done it. And if you start from the lower left corner, it's going to be really helpful because it'll help you not lose your bearing. And the other nice thing about this tape is I can put a check mark over rows that I've finished, and then I'll know if I've crossed it out on the page and I've checked it off here that I need to go up another row. That's how you keep your bearings. So starting at an edge and sticking with that edge and then going up, or if you want to go up or left, however you want to do it. In the case to not confuse myself, because I know that that top row is not part of my 8x10. It's just where I put the letters. I'm just going to put a little, I'm going to cross it out so I don't get confused and start trying to draw something in that. So if I look at this first square, I'm going to show it to you up close. If you look, really all that's happening is I'm looking at this kind of V shape that splits the square almost in the middle on the left and sort of opens up and does a third move to the right. Let me indicate that for you. So if I want to just indicate that little part of shadow in my cat's back leg, I'm just going to do that. And then I'm going to check it off. If I wanted to add more information, I could indicate some of his striping because he is a tabby, and I can remember it for later. For you, you can take a lot of time with this transfer and indicate colors if you wish by taking another pencil or this one, and if I were to put, you know, a B for black for the shadow, or if I wanted it purple, you can create your own map. For me, I'm just going to do the cartoon, and then I'm going to use the image when I go to paint in our next lesson as my reference. So with that square done, I'm going to this square, and it seems to connect. And again, you can measure if you wish, but I'm going to just indicate his toe and a little bit of striping done there. Now we're going to where his paw is more substantial, and there's some splits in his toes. And then if you would like to indicate what's dark, you can sort of shadow that in with whatever medium you're using. I jumped into that other row, sorry. I'll try and stick with the lesson plan. So I've done this one, and then here comes another paw that sort of happens like this. So I can check that off, that toe, and then this guy connects here. I can add its other paw, Wonka's other paw. This one's kind of high. I eyeball, it's what I do. You're welcome to really dissect this, put glasses on, whatever it is you need to do. By all means, do it. And look at this. I don't have to do necessarily anything in here unless I want to indicate the background imagery, which I'll just kind of allude to it. I'm going to have some fun coming up with something else when I go to actually do the paint, when I'm doing his final portrait. Okay, so we now are done with this row. So we're going to go done, and we're going to row 2. Row 2 is just kind of a lot of fur texture. So I'm going to indicate it so that I can find those stripes later. And if you're looking at how I'm doing my rendering, so I did this one and this one, I'm kind of making the hair go in the directions that I see the hair in Wonka in this image. If you're doing it one box at a time, it's less daunting, because with fur on animals, that can be really overwhelming. But if you really look at how it's indicated in your reference, as you do it one square at a time, then you're doing a lot of head work for yourself for later. Because when you go to paint this, you're gonna have a guide for fur direction. So I encourage you to indicate any details with fur that you can at this stage. So we got this one and this one done. And there seems to be a little gap. Let's see, it seems to be here. And that's sort of in shadow. He's kind of got a double shadow going on in here. If you look, that's the leg and that's the background. So for the sake of indicating, we should do a darker edge line for that leg so I can remember it later. as I do this. And again, here we have just some background shapes. It's nice to indicate it because it gives me something for like for dealing with later, for abstract background or bright background, whatever it is I feel like I want to do. And so I'm going to call this guy done. I'm going to go up to row 3. So row 3 again is just carrying on his striping pattern and indicating it with the direction of the fur will help me later. And here's where his front leg kind of crosses in front of his back leg, which is this shape here. And now I see that it'll help me if I just shadow this out, because then I'll remember that when I go to paint him next time. So we've got this guy done, and we're working on this one. See, it really, really helps to check off as you go, because it's so easy to get lost when you're working sort of in a micro level of the image itself, that if you just take in each portion, it's a lot less information to go from your brain, from your eye to your brain, and then back through your hand. If you're doing it one section at a time, it's kind of almost a mathematical way to illustrate and render. And I have a lot of math in my brain. I had considered being a medical illustrator, so I took math longer than most artists do. But I'm glad I did, because I use it all the time. I use it for visually doing proportion with my head and knowing how to section things off, but then also doing the math of dividing ratios. When I'm doing mold making, I have to know volume so that I pour or I mix the proper amount to make a mold. So all of it kind of matters. And so anyone that says artists don't need math is lying to you. They just are. So I'm going to indicate this little horizon line. It's that line right there. And it looks like there's something else going on right about here with a double edge line. So there, I'm done with 3. Now I'm ready to go to 4. 4 begins the outline of his back. And a couple of little stripes in this section. And then the stripes carry and kind of go diagonal right there. And then there's a skinnier line there, and then that seems to be done. And then up in this square, I see an indication of some more fur detail that kind of blends into the lower box. And then again, it's coming in here where I'm seeing some stripes indicated. It's a little tough with the printout I did. I don't know if you're picking it up, but there's yellow, there's some yellow ink that registered. I'm going to take some tape and tape this up and do a little close up for you. If you can see it, my printer on my, in my printer puts these lines, so I'm just trying to ignore those and not get them confused with what I'm actually looking at. So back to regular. Okay, since I walked away, you can really, again, lose their bearings. If you get confused, all you have to do is, I know I'm in row 4, that's row 4, so I'm here. The last box I checked off was box 3, which is this one, but I've also drawn box D. I have to look at the lettering. So it's row 4 and box D was where I ended up. So I go row 4, and you can't see it because I covered it with the tape. Row 4, column D, and there we are. So I know that I was right here, and I'm going to connect that. So I can check that off. Right here, the stripes in the cat begin to kind of go diagonal in the box, and then kind of fluff, and then another stripe is indicated here, so I'm there. Nothing seems to be really going on here except that edge line. So I'm going to call it row 4 is done. All right, if it's better for you to move it down, I'm going to do that just so I can see where I am and you can see it as well. I'm going to also tape this in a way that my letters are still obvious. Okay, row 5. Here's row 5. See, the cool thing is I just have to kind of indicate that little information in the box. I can't stress this enough. It will really help you find your animal and his or her proportions. So now we're going to that box. I'm going to connect that because it connects through there. And I'm going to begin that stripe up in the upper corner right here. There seems to be a little fur indication there. That's done. Now we're here. And you'll just keep doing what I'm doing with your animal and double check where you are. If something doesn't look right, stop every once in a while, pull your image off and go, well, is this looking like this? Because it should. I'm using a scale method. I can kind of, while I'm doing this, sort of maybe clean up some of the edges and define them a little bit more, so I'll be able to work from it later. But you can see that this cat is coming together. And there's some shadowing here, a little bit over near his toes, and there's another toe here. So we're getting there. It's coming along. All right, before we get lost again, I'm gonna take this. Okay, to reset where I am, I know that in the drawing, I ended up finishing row 5, column D. Row 5, column D. Good, and we were exactly where I thought it was. So now I'm going to do what I see in this box right here. And it's just a bit of information. Just not a big, huge commitment, not crazy, not scary, just a box. A box you get to check off. So I didn't think you needed to watch me render the entire cartoon, but I wanted to point out a couple things that I did when the camera wasn't rolling. And that is, I looked at the eye in my reference and I thought that might be too much information per square for you. If you feel like there's too much information to keep track of and get the proportions, you can always add an inner grid in a square and then indicate it in the original and break it down into quadrants and draw the quadrants. In the case of this eye, for you guys, it might be easier to do that because then you can find the proportions. This was definitely a delicate operation. So if this is the outline indicator of this square, there's kind of a lot of information going on in here. I sort of eyeballed the proportions when I did it, but if you are concerned that you're gonna miss the proportions, go ahead and just do an inner grid on your drawing, split it twice, down the center and across, and then split the square that you're having trouble with, and then just do each square at a time. That's gonna help you keep track of the size of the eye, the angle of the eyes, and help you if you're a little overwhelmed by detail in that particular moment. You should have an easier time too with a pencil than I'm having with this pastel because I'm smearing it and it's getting everywhere. But if there's an area that you're a little more concerned about, do an inner grid within the square and break it down even farther. Just know that if you break down a square here in 4 quadrants, you got to double check. So say like I want to do this eye. This is 8, row 8, column D, row 8, column D, it's this square. So if I'm splitting this one, I got to split this one too. And then I can one at a time, left to right, do this square, then this square, then this square, then this square. And it might actually break down proportions for you if you're not confident with how you look at a square and do that. But we're just about done. What I have done and what you've done is transferred an image to 200% in size by using a grid, doing 1 inch by 1 inch on your reference and scaling it up to 2 inch by 2 inch on your canvas. I blocked it in to give myself some room, and I drew square by square and got this beautifully proportioned portrait of my cat, Wong Cat. It's a cartoon right now, and our next step will be to paint it. So thanks for joining me.